First, I want to point out that for those of you who haven't seen the BPC report yet, I encourage you to go read it, because one of the interesting things that they have in their report that I haven't seen anywhere else is they actually put out a calendar for June and July, and they list all the different sort of major bills that Treasury is going to have to pay during that time frame. And it's really, really interesting to look at. And if you just look at, the first couple of days in June, as you were saying earlier, the big question on everybody's mind is whether Treasury is going to collect enough revenue to pay all of its bills, before, June 1st, June 2nd comes, or, to pay all of its bills before June 15th, actually, right? Because that's when the next big bump of revenues are due. People who pay their taxes, their income taxes via quarterly estimated payments, they've got another payment that's due on June 15th. So the big question is, can the government, that's our first hurdle, can the government get to June 15th? And when you look at BPC's calendar, between June 1st and June 15th, Treasury is going to have bills totaling approximately $170 billion. That's how much cash they're going to need to pay those bills, including about $50 billion in Social Security payments. And as of last Friday, Cinco de Mayo, Treasury had about $206.7 billion in cash on hand. So right now, technically, they could make that payment, but obviously there's a lot of field, if you will, a lot of running room, a lot of football field in between now and then. So, and I don't know if you can answer this, Rachel, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. Can you put some sort of probability on whether or not, the Treasury can make it to that point? I mean, is it like 50-50 that we can get to June 15th? Is it like 10%? Is it like 90%? How big is that risk?
So it's an excellent question. And to describe a little bit of how we think about the range that we provide, it's, right now, so I should first say that it's going to depend on what the next even week looks like in revenues, and BPC will be providing additional analysis to be able to better narrow that range, even in the coming days. But I'll say on your point about kind of the range and how we assign that risk. If Treasury is in a situation where its cash balances are so low that there could be a potential risk that it could find itself unable to make good on its obligations on one day, even if that risk is 1%, if we're looking at kind of at those low cash balances, that's not a good place for the department to be. And so we specify this range as one in which the risk of default increases as the range continues. And so right now we'll be able to narrow that range in the coming days, but right now I can't really provide a particular percentage likelihood on where default is landing, given this particular range, because I will note, I mean, at this point, the range is relatively wide, but a lot of that is just because we really do need these next 2 weeks of understanding the revenue growth or not, to understand kind of what that risk in June will look like, from June 1st to June 15th and so on. But it is, lawmakers need to look at this range as there's risk across it, and they really do need to act well in advance of that range, we believe, to ensure that the full faith and credit of the United States is upheld. As we encroach on that range or cross into it, they really are choosing politically to play with fire every single day with the full faith and credit of the United States.